The first men settled the Riverlands, where they soon came into conflict with the native children of the forest. After countless centuries of war, the two peoples forged a pact. Upon the Isle of Faces in the God's Eye, the children withdrew into their forests, while the first men established their kingdoms across the land, granted to them by the mysterious folk. Over the thousands of years that followed, many families ruled the Riverlands as River Kings, claiming such titles as the Kings of the Trident or the Kings of the Rivers and the Hills. During the Age of Heroes, numerous dynasties held dominion there, including the Fishers, Brackens, Blackwoods and Mudds, the last of the first men kings to rule the Riverlands in their own right. The era of the first men river kings ended with the arrival of the Andals. Songs still recall battles such as the Fall of Maidenpool, the Widow's Ford, the White Wood, and the Battle of the Bitter River. King Christopher IV Mudd gathered a host to oppose the Andal invaders. It is said he won 199 battles against them, yet in the 200th he was slain. His son and successor Christopher V proved to be far less capable, and under his rule the kingdom at last fell. While indeed some of the first men kingdoms of the Riverlands were taken by the Andals via conquest, just as many of them also joined the realm of the Andals via the marriage of Andal kings and their children marrying into the old first men kingdoms. Hence why there are still some houses in the Riverlands that can trace their lineage all the way back to the most ancient of the first men kings, even if they are now actually culturally Andal. The victorious Andals established their own kingdoms and dynasties within the Riverlands. The first house to unify the Riverlands as a single kingdom was House Justman. Uniting the region was a very challenging task, keeping it together even harder. The Justman kings ended up ruling for nearly 3 centuries. While on paper that does not sound like a long time, given the thousands of years of Westerosi history, but by comparison, House Targaryen sat the Iron Throne for just as long as the Justmans ruled the Riverlands. During this time, King Benedict II Justman expanded their domain eastward to include much of what we now know as the Crown Lands, the likes of the towns of Duskendale and Rosby, and the mouth of the Blackwater Rush, which would one day become the site of King's Landing. Their rule came to a sudden end when the sons of King Bernard II Justman were murdered by Corrid Hoare in the Bloody Keep on Pike in the Iron Islands. When Corrin sacrificed Bernard to the drowned god, the Justman line was extinguished, and the Riverlands fell into abject chaos. For the next century, the region was contested by several rival houses, including the Blackwoods, Brackens, Vances, Mallisters, and Charltons. The Hooks were also accounted among the ancient River Kings, claiming dominion over the Blackwater Rush. Throughout this period, the competing rulers faced constant pressure from neighbouring powers as well. The kings of the Iron Islands, the kings of the Rock, the mountain clans of the Vale, the kings of the Reach, and the Storm Kings, as well as pirates from the Stepstones and the Three Sisters. The chaos was finally ended at last by Torrance Teague, who succeeded in reuniting the Riverlands, though he and his descendants proved unpopular among the often rebellious subjects. Some sources suggest that the rule of House Teague may not have been uninterrupted, but rather challenged repeatedly by rival river dynasties over the generations. The last native river king came from House Teague, among them Humphrey I Teague and his kin. Humphrey founded numerous septs and mother houses throughout the Riverlands, and when the pious king of the rivers and the hills began to suppress the worship of the old gods, Lord Roderick Blackwood of Raventree Hall rose up in rebellion, joined by House Vance of Atlanta and House Tully of Riverrun. Humphrey Teague's loyalists, supported by the Faith Militant, were close to crushing the revolt. Seeking aid, Roderick called upon his kinsman, the Storm King Arlen III Durrandon, who saw an opportunity to restore the Riverlands to House Blackwood, which had once ruled during the Age of Heroes. Arlen led a great host of Stormlanders across the Blackwater Rush, defeating the Loyalists in several engagements and lifting the siege of Raventree. The bloody final confrontation occurred one afternoon between the Mother's Teats during which the line of House Teague was wiped out. Humphrey fell first, followed by his sons, Humphrey II, Hollis and Tyler, and finally by his brother Daemon, each of whom had briefly ruled as river kings. Other notable casualties include Roderick Blackwood, Elston Tully, and Lords Bracken, Darry, Smallwood, Vance of Adranta, and Avance of Wayfarer's Rest, though it's unclear whether they died in the final battle or earlier in the campaign. The conflict became known as the Battle of Six Kings, referring to the 5 Teague kings and Arlen, the Storm King. Roderick Blackwood's heir was only 8 years old, and Arlen distrusted Roderick's surviving brother. He considered placing Roderick's eldest child, Shiera Blackwood, on the throne alongside his own son, but the Riverlords refused to accept a woman as a ruler. In the end, Arlen incorporated the Riverlands into the dominion of the Storm Kings. The Storm Kings of House Durrandon ruled the Riverlands for at least 300 years, yet governing such a vast domain proved difficult, and the Riverlords rose in rebellion, time and time again. With nearly every generation, a new challenger attempted to seize the crown of the Trident. Amongst those who briefly ruled as petty kings was Lucifer Justman, Mark Mudd, Lord Robert Vance, Lord Peter Mallister, Lady Jane Nutt, Sir Adam Rivers, Pate of Fairmarket, and Sir Lyman Fisher, along with a host of others. Each was eventually crushed by the powers of Storm's End. During this long period of Durrandon rule, members of House Tully would often serve the Storm Kings in positions of trust and authority, holding prominent offices within the realm, kind of functioning as how Lord Paramounts do within the modern Seven Kingdoms of Westeros under the Iron Throne. The Storm Kings were eventually overthrown by the Iron King, Harwin Hardhand, who forged a new realm, stretching from the Iron Islands to the Riverlands. This period, known as the Age of the Kings of Isles and Rivers, is recorded in the Iron Chronicle. Harwin's son, Halleck Hoare, chose to rule from Fairmarket rather than the Iron Islands. Harwin's grandson, Harren the Black, later ordered the construction of a vast fortress, Harrenhal, as a testament to the power and wealth of House Hoare. The castle took 40 years to complete, and consumed immense resources and labour. During its construction, renewed feuding between House Blackwood and Bracken provoked Harren to punish both families. In a bitter twist of fate, the greatest castle ever built was completed on the very day Aegon Targaryen, Lord of Dragonstone, landed with his dragon on the banks of the Blackwater. King Harrenhal was so deeply unpopular in the Riverlands when Aegon's conquest began. Rather than rally to House Hoare, many Riverlords rose in rebellion and declared for House Targaryen. House Tully was the first to do so, soon followed by the Blackwoods, Mallisters, Vances, Brackens, Pipers, Freys and Swans. Harren the Black believed if he refused to meet Aegon the Conqueror in open battle, the invaders would be forced to lay siege to Harrenhal alongside the rebellious Riverlords. Instead, Aegon unleashed his dragon from the sky. The dark dragon flames of Balerion burned so fiercely that much of Harrenhal melted, burned, killing Harren and his sons within its walls. After the destruction of Harrenhal, Aegon granted Lord Edmund Tully dominion over the Riverlands under Targaryen rule, naming him Lord Paramount of the Trident. Rivermen would later form a great part of Aegon's host at the Field of Fire. The Inn of the Kneeling Man on the Red Fork was said to have been built upon the spot where King Torrhen Stark, king in the north, bent the knee to Aegon. When the Dance of the Dragons began in 129 AC, the fractious Riverlords were nominally under House Tully's rule, with most siding with Rhaenyra Targaryen, and the Blacks against Aegon II and the Greens. Prince Daemon Targaryen led the initial assaults, taking Harrenhal, and following that with victories at the Battle of the Burning Mill and the capture of Stonehenge. The Green Army from the Westerlands won the Battle of the Red Fort and at Acorn Hall in 130 AC, but they were subsequently crushed by the Rivermen and Northmen at the Battle by the Lakeshore. In retaliation, Prince Aemon Targaryen and his dragon Vhagar burned large parts of the Riverlands, though Aemon was ultimately slain by Daemon above the God's Eye, with both men losing their life during the confrontation. Sir Criston Cole, the Hand of the King to Aegon II, and Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, marched most of the Green Host through the Riverlands, only to be thwarted by scorched earth tactics. Rivermen and their northern allies then ambushed and decimated Cole's forces at the Battle of the Butcher's Ball, south of the God's Eye. The Blacks continued their advance southwards, but suffered defeats at the First Battle of Tumbleton. Sir Adam Balerion later led 4,000 Rivermen to the Second Battle of Tumbleton. In 131 AC, Lords Kermit Tully and Benjicott Blackwood commanded Rivermen to victory over Lord Boros Baratheon at the Battle of the King's Road. Supporters of Aegon III Targaryen, known as the Lads, were welcomed into King's Landing after Aegon II's death. In the aftermath of the war, over 1,000 Northmen settled in the Riverlands, marrying local women at widows' fairs and serving as guards and men-at-arms. Their presence strengthened the Riverlords and continued the partial revival of the worship of the old gods in the region. Prior to Robert's rebellion, Lord House Tully initially betrothed his daughter Catelyn to Brandon Stark, the heir to Winterfell. However, both Brandon and his father, Lord Rickard Stark, were executed by Aerys II Targaryen, the Mad King, prompting Hosa to side with the rebels during Robert's rebellion. After the Battle of the Bells at Stony Sept, in the southern Riverlands, Catelyn married Lord Eddard Stark, while her sister Lysa wed Lord Jon Arryn in a double wedding at Riverrun. Several of Lord Tully's vassals, including Lords Darry, Goodbrook, Mootton, and Rhaegar, remained loyal to House Targaryen. In response, Hosta punished the Goodbrooks with fire and sword. The decisive Battle of the Trident, which ultimately determined the outcome of the war, was fought in the Riverlands. Lord Walder Frey arrived late to the battle, joining the rebel side. As we know during the events of the main book series, the Riverlands once again is burned as it has become the battleground for the War of the Five Kings, mainly fought over by Robb Stark, king in the north, a Tully on his mother's side, and Tywin Lannister and the forces of the Iron Throne.